Hi, good afternoon. We are so happy you joined us today. You have tuned in to the State Spotlight on Basic Needs Initiatives, and we're highlighting Kentucky today. My name is Andrea Gonzalez with Trellis Strategies. As everyone's filing in, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping. You are welcome to post, and we encourage you to post any questions or comments you have in the chat. If you prefer the Q&A, you can also use the Q&A feature. We will be emailing out a recording of this webinar along with any presentation materials our presenters want to share after. So even if someone you knew registered and wasn't able to tune in, we will be emailing them the recording and the materials. I think in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Carrie.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. Appreciate it. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the kickoff of Trellis's State Spotlight Series featuring Kentucky. The Spotlight Series will highlight different state approaches to reducing basic needs and security. I am Carrie Welton. I am Trellis's Senior Policy Strategist and a proud first-gen community college, former low-income single parent who experienced many of the barriers that we'll discuss. And my passion for this work has been directly informed by my 12-year journey to complete a 4-year degree and really fueled by the knowledge that many people are not able to complete at all. I'm also thrilled to be joined by Dr. Lilly Massa-McKinley, who leads the Kentucky Student Success Collaborative. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself a little bit more fully later on. So what we will do is we are going to go through who are modern learners, why do we have a focus on basic needs initiatives and setting the context for what really is the cost of attendance? We'll talk a little bit about some promising practices and some data, and then we will hand it over to Lilly to spotlight the basic needs work that they have been doing. So I'm going to share this now. I'm going to share it at the end. Is what we are focusing on is how an ecosystems approach can really move the needle on basic needs and security. We know that the challenges facing higher education are going to require us to be more strategic and resourceful to accomplish our goals in the face of less resources. And if we aren't acting now, we avoid losing a decade of educational attainment progress. Just to set a little bit of context for that, we know that over the course of the Great Recession from 2008 to 2018, states were forced to cut about $7 billion from state higher education funding. And we now know that SNAP and Medicaid cuts that will be coming down from the federal government are going to equal about $1 trillion over the course of the next 10 years. So really this emphasis on how higher education's voice and advocacy in state and federal conversations play a really crucial role in the allocation and availability of resources and the impact that will have on post-secondary education. If you don't know us, Trellis Strategies is a trusted research and technical assistance firm with nearly 40 years of experience in higher education. Our mission is to advance post-secondary education workforce development through data-driven insights. We specialize in qualitative and quantitative research and alignment strategies that support institutions and states to develop comprehensive strategies that improve economic mobility and workforce outcomes. And we do that really through the lens of understanding that the journey of the modern learner is rarely linear. It's often marked by interruptions, restarts, shift in direction, really reflecting the complex interplay of work, education, finances, and personal responsibilities. We know that the modern learner's journey is reflected by persistence, and that the determination of these learners in higher education mean that understanding their experiences allow us to better support progress, reentry, and completion, and create opportunities that align with educational goals and workforce demands. And when we think about basic needs initiatives, we really think about basic needs and security as a system issue, not just a service problem. Direct services provide essential support, but don't solve underlying structural causes of basic needs and security. Things like the rising housing cost, wage inequities, and policy barriers that contribute significantly to unmet basic needs. So thinking about how a holistic approach aligns legislation, policies, funding, and lived experience go further to address root causes, and that the decision-making that incorporates data and lived experiences allow us all to target solutions that affect these systemic issues effectively. We'll talk a little bit about cost of attendance. You can see attendance is in quotes, because what we're increasingly seeing is that across multiple sources, that personal financial challenges are now the leading reason why people are not enrolling and why they are struggling to persist and complete and at risk of stopping out. I won't be going over all of the data points today to make sure that we have time for discussion at the end, but what this slide really conveys is the accumulation of data we have is pointing to that non-tuition barriers, when we think about the 70% of unenrolled adults who said that the need to work or work conflicts are why they are not enrolled. And then we think about the 48% of enrolled undergraduates who have difficulty concentrating due to their financial circumstances. And then even across different research studies, about 30 to 55% of people who have some college no credentials cited that personal financial reasons were their number one reason for stopping out. And I know this is particularly disheartening for states and institutions who have worked diligently to bring down the cost of tuition and fees, which when adjusted for inflation have declined over the past 10 years. But what has not declined, as many of us have personally experienced, are living expenses. This chart represents only a 4-year time period from 2020 to 2024. And what we see is that costs are up across all categories about 21%, with transportation having risen the most, followed closely by food and housing. So it's unsurprising that people are reporting not only educational challenges, but are struggling to make ends meet overall, particularly for those people who have not completed a degree or credential. And we know that non-tuition barriers really are the hidden part of the iceberg. We see that at 4-year public colleges and universities, tuition and fees comprise about 40% of costs. And for community college students, that's about 20% of costs, really leaving the bulk of the rest to non-tuition expenses. And this is why we focus on student financial wellness. Our Trellis Strategies administers the Student Financial Wellness Survey and have since 2018. It is a self-reported online survey that documents financial well-being and student success across a variety of indicators. It helps institutions identify barriers, raise money to support those issues, develop programs, assess initiatives, and build a culture of caring for students. In our 2024 undergraduate student financial wellness survey, we had about 53,000 students participate, and we will be having our 2025 student financial wellness survey results coming out in about a month. And we know that focusing on wellness really requires a recognition that individuals have a variety of circumstances they're facing, and adopting a framework that recognizes they are making the best decisions they can for their circumstances and resources, and finding the strategies that we need to support students to move through that continuum to achieve greater financial stability. In 2023, Trellis was fortunate enough to support the entire Kellogg, Kentucky Community and Career Technical College system. And that was responses from about 3,000 students. And what we found was that among Kentucky Community College respondents, about 45% were first-generation students and 45% were parenting students, which is higher than overall national numbers. Almost 70% of KCTCS students were working or enrolled, and about 5% are former foster youth, with about 15% representing the LGBTQIA community. And what we found from those survey results was that financial security is a core barrier. About 2/3 of students reported they would have trouble finding $500 in an emergency, and 31% said they would not be able to attain that amount of money from any source. We also saw that 75% of Kentucky community college students reported running out of money at least once during the year, and 30% ran out of money 8 or more times, acknowledging that this is really a monthly occurrence, if not a systemic issue. And we also see across food insecurity that half of respondents reported experiencing low or very low food insecurity in the prior 30 days, and only about 20% of respondents said they had ever visited a food pantry. So focusing on basic needs initiatives is really about moving from isolated supports to an ecosystem. And when we think about that, one of the things that I think about, particularly in my role, is all of the systems that students interact with simultaneously while they're attempting to enroll in, persist, and complete a post-secondary credential. So all of the columns that you see on the left-hand side are the supports that we traditionally think of as higher education supports. This is not a comprehensive list, but what we increasingly want people to understand is that those non-tuition supports are incredibly critical. So food assistance that can be available through the Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. The program could be called something different depending on your state. In California, it's called CalFresh, so it may not be called SNAP in your state. And then income supports through programs like the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, childcare subsidies, healthcare access through programs like Medicaid and state healthcare exchanges, housing and transportation supports really help build a more comprehensive ecosystem. And we think about these two diverging paths when we have systems that acknowledge basic needs and security, that restrict or discourage education. We know what really happens is that people end up in a cycle of low wage work, which depresses wages, it can prolong use of public benefits, and even harm child outcomes. But conversely, we know when public support programs improve access to education and training, that facilitates enrollment and persistence, produces better economic outcomes, including higher wages, lower unemployment rates, and lower poverty rates. It bolsters educational attainment, which really supports states' educational attainment goals, and also improves intergenerational mobility because we know that the children of college graduates show better school performance while they're in K through 12, and then are also more likely to enroll in a persistent and complete a college credential themselves. So we think about the modern learner as the center of this ecosystem. And what we understand is that there are federal policies, there are state policies, there are local and even institutional policies. And expanding the scope of potential solutions really helps us strengthen long-term sustainable policy changes. We know that policy happens at many layers. Basic needs outcomes are shaped by decisions made at every level that are programmatic, and no single policy is the whole solution, it is a layered ecosystem. But everyone has an on-ramp no matter their role or capacity. Students, staff, faculty, administrators. Sorry, I have animation that are not advancing here, which is excellent timing. Have the ability to influence this ecosystem, and engagement is not limited to those with formal authority. Change is built through many types of contributions, and Lilly will talk more about those in Kentucky in a moment. And we know that when campuses innovate, they pilot programs to expand and collect data and demonstrate impact, that those efforts become the foundation for institutional policies, state funding models, and even federal rule changes. That local action builds the evidence and momentum that shapes broader reform. We know we have to move to effective solutions require a systemic thinking approach and really be able to address the root causes rather than the symptoms. So again, coming back to this key takeaway, really acknowledging that the challenges that we are facing are going to require us to be more strategic with the resources we have, are going to require us to break down silos, work across policies, systems, partnerships, and that higher education plays an incredibly important and increasingly important role in the allocation of federal and state resources to be able to accomplish those goals. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Lilly Massa-McKinley. I'm going to stop screen sharing and allow her to take over. So give us just one moment for that transition.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Carrie, and Trellis Strategies. Trellis and Carrie have been an incredible partner for our work in Kentucky over the last several years. And I'm very excited to just be able to share a little bit about our process and kind of where we are and what we hope to be working on next. So I am Lilly Massa-McKinley. I'm the Assistant Vice President, and I lead the Kentucky Student Success Collaborative, which is an initiative of our SHIO, the Kentucky Council on Postsecondary Education. The collaborative was started in 2021 with the real purpose of three things inside the circle over here. We wanted to improve our culture of collaboration in Kentucky because so many of the challenges that our students face and our institutions face are shared challenges. We are all experiencing this in some way, whether it's a priority for our work or it's a challenge that we need to overcome. And we also are very much committed to helping build our capacity for change in Kentucky, which is hopefully a long-term sustainability strategy where we can really start building our own muscles in change leadership and scaling our work at a much more accelerated pace. And then finally, one of our core responsibilities as a part of our CPE, the Council on Postsecondary Education, as well as the collaborative, is to really demonstrate measurable gains in student success through our collaborative work. And so that really boils down to three slightly more plain language objectives, which is one, to improve the way we work together. Two is to facilitate and work with our campus partners to facilitate these change initiatives for strategic priorities, and then to learn as we're going and scale what works. One of the mantras that I just truly believe in and have seen benefit us in our work so much is that we can accomplish more together than any of us can achieve on our own. Just a little context in Kentucky, our Kentucky Community and Technical College system is an official system, but the 16 colleges still operate very independently. And then we have 8 public universities in Kentucky as well, and they are all separate. So we don't have a system for our universities. And so when we are really focused on a common challenge or priority, this is a helpful mantra, just to know that, we could each do our own work, but we'll learn much more together and hopefully get to the solution the fastest. One of the first priorities that really arose as we were beginning the launch of the collaborative was a focus on student basic needs. And all of our campuses were echoing that this was a significant challenge. And this is 2021. So we're still kind of in the thick of the pandemic, and a lot of students facing significant financial hardship and just changes to our daily routine and way of doing life. And, we had been very fortunate to have 1 or 2 of our institutions participate in the Trellis survey before we really launched our basic needs work. So we had a little bit of a baseline and a little bit of context for how pervasive was this challenge. And we know in Kentucky that more than half of students struggle to have their basic needs met. Kind of going off of just a few key statistics that could really galvanize our stakeholders and our partners, not just within higher education, but broadly across our ecosystem, as Carrie referenced, other state agencies, other education providers, nonprofit community organizations. All of us were involved. And we were really looking at our 60 by 30 attainment goal through the lens of the financial barriers that students face. And we set 2 objectives to our basic needs strategy. One was to increase access to basic needs supports for all college students. And the other was to increase access to post-secondary education for individuals receiving state supports. And that has really helped broaden the lens and have both an access and a success agenda within our strategy. What I would say that is one of the secret sauces or, part of the recipe that helped us, I think, be very successful in pulling together our partners and stakeholders to work on this shared issue was the process. And Civic Lab is another one of our organizational partners that has worked with us for a very long time. And they always talk about the importance of the process and how when you are, starting a collective or a collaboration, that you really need to have a clear process for working together that all partners can understand and see both the pathway and the finish line. So we have embraced and adapted a process wheel that was developed first by our partners at Civic Lab. And we shared this process with our 50 plus stakeholders who were convened for our Basic Needs Action Network. And we said, this is what we want to do. We want to start by really identifying and clarifying the shared issue that we all want to work on together. We want to identify the right people to bring in the room. We want to talk about trust and what it takes to build trust across sectors, which is really understanding each organization's priorities toward that common goal. We need to understand our current state picture and dream together about our future state picture. And then we really need to start prioritizing the work. And of course, having a continuous improvement approach to seeing what does work and what do we want to scale or do differently. One of the other key pieces of this approach, I think, is the student-centered nature of the work that we do and that all of us do in higher education. and really focusing on how do I know what the student is experiencing? How do I know beyond the data that will show me really helpful trends and even have some demographic insights for me if there are disparities in outcomes or access. But really having the student's voice be a part of understanding our current state picture, as well as thinking about what that future state picture can look like. And so that was also a part of our process. I'm just going to walk a little bit through this wheel and not to repeat myself, but basic needs emerged as a common priority in Kentucky. We established our action network of 50 campus and community partners. We were very clear in outlining the process and identifying the priorities of each of our partners that were involved in the work. We led several discovery projects, including student voice research, including data analysis and a policy scan to better understand our current state picture. Then our group got together and we really discussed the data, we discussed the opportunities, we discussed our greatest pain points, and we identified 8 strategic priorities and 5 critical success factors to our work. After the strategy was launched, we brought together a guiding team. So campus and community partners, kind of a smaller advisory group who was going to help us prioritize, problem solve, and promote the implementation of our strategy. And that group really prioritized working with our Cabinet for Health and Family Services on benefit navigators, a partnership with adult education to help individuals access post-secondary education at stronger rates, and then also to put together a collective grant application to help us fund some of the additional pieces of our strategy. We have a lot of this work in action, which I'll go over in a minute. And we have also, through our continuous improvement approach, continued learning and identified new areas where we need to dive deeper. I will be happy to put, or maybe Carrie, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, the Kentucky strategy for student basic needs.
I just shared the report, Lily. Is that, or is there something else you want?
What was that?
I shared the report. Is that?
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
that's the one. Okay. So that's already out there for you all. This just is a high level of kind of our 8 priority recommendations. And just a few that I want to highlight is the importance of screening for basic needs, insecurity, and benefits eligibility. And that was the #1 strategy that our campus partners wanted to move forward. We also thought that we had some opportunity in our state public benefit plans to increase flexibility for students, just based on some national landscape analysis that Carrie had done with us, that there were some other states that were providing more opportunities for students through their public benefit programs. And so that has been an area of work as well. Everybody talked about capacity, especially because this is such this is an area of expertise. So just like filling out the FAFSA or, college admissions, can kind of be an area of expertise for college advising, benefit application and, follow through on all of the checks and documentation is certainly an area of expertise as well. And our campuses did not believe that they really had that training and expertise. So we really wanted to work on the partnership to hopefully improve that. We also identified training as a key need. And as our student voice research really affirmed this need when they told us that, listen, I know you have a basic needs coordinator on campus, but I am going to reach out to the faculty member or the staff person that I trust the most. And I'm probably only going to come to that person when I am legit in crisis, when I have exhausted all of my other opportunities and network. And then I know that this person cares about me, or maybe they have said, hey, are you doing all right? And it's an opportunity for them to share. So we realized that we needed to do more than just have the experts on campus, but we needed to train up and build those connections and awareness among our broad campus stakeholders. Over on Objective 2 side, the child care solutions work was one that was not originally on the radar of the campus partners, I would say, but it was very much on the radar of our community partners. And we had several organizations that really focused on access to childcare and support for parenting students that were a part of the work, And it was really great to have their voice in the conversation to help us realize what a significant issue and barrier this is for basic needs. So that became one of our priorities as well. We have certainly continued to do several of these others. But one thing that I will say, when you have a strategy that is 8 recommendations and 5 critical success factors, you do have to prioritize and kind of do things in steps. So it's not that feasible to do everything all at once, which is totally the norm here. So just a couple of things that we do have in action that were primarily a part of our grant application that we submitted through our network. One of those was the development of a basic needs data dashboard. And in Kentucky, we have a really wonderful longitudinal data system that connects our post-secondary enrollment data with both employment and earnings data, as well as access or participation in public benefit programs. And so we were able and have been able to develop this dashboard to tell us the enrollment of individuals receiving public benefits, to look at their completion rates, to look at their employment rates upon graduation, and to look at their economic mobility 1, 3, and 5 years after graduation. So we're in the process of working on that dashboard. It should be ready to launch by June. And to go along with the dashboard will be a handful of research briefs on the various topics. We also have been very successful in launching a partnership with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services in Kentucky. And we have benefit navigators that are called connectors. And they help screen students for public benefits. And they also provide referrals to community-based resources and are really that expert on the campus. They are currently located full-time on all of our community college campuses. And the only thing I'll say about how that wonderful partnership came to pass was we were briefing our secretary for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services on the progress of our Basic Needs Action Network, because several of his team were represented in the work. And he absolutely saw the need for it, and he really knew where all of the resources were within the cabinet. And he identified and just said, hey, can you make this happen? And within 4 months, we had full-time connectors that were approved to join our community college campuses. We are also really focused on communications, and we're working in partnership with the Hope Center on a student testimonial campaign to help reduce stigma and raise awareness of the basic needs, resources, and supports. We're creating this trusted sources training, as I mentioned, which was a direct need that the students identified, that the English professors and the dining services workers and the residence life folks, that everybody can have a basic awareness of how to support a student who may be in crisis with a basic needs concern. And as a piece of that, we wanted to not just train them on how to talk to a student or what is basic needs and how many of our students may be experiencing basic needs insecurity, but we also wanted to have some tangible resources for them to go to in the moment with that student or to provide a warm handoff. And so we have created, or we are working on, a website template, which will help take sometimes the basic needs resources that are all over many different landing pages on a university or college website and try to create a centralized approach to basic needs resources. And then also, we have an incredible community-based asset map in Kentucky, and it's called myky.info. And our community partner, the Family Scholar House, who manages that website and verifies and vets all of those resources, was also a part of our network. And so we are taking their website and we're adding an AI agent to the top of it so that it is just a little bit more intuitive and helpful for our non-experts to be able to search and point students in the right direction. One of the pieces that kind of emerged as an unknown that we didn't even realize when we first began was an understanding of the impact of emergency aid on student success and outcomes. And the reason for that was that there were different definitions of emergency aid, lots of different pots of money around a campus, and no real centralized point where They know what's happening, who's getting what. And even in the financial aid office, it wasn't being tracked in that way, even though that might be the best home to start asking some questions. And then also, what are the KPIs for understanding the real investment in our students? If over half of them don't have anywhere to go, if they face a $500 emergency, how can our emergency aid resources be best leveraged to help those students when that situation may arise for them? So we're now in a statewide initiative where we are process mapping emergency aid programs at our universities, and we're trying to identify the commonalities and also just the differences. And then that will be a good starting point for us as we work on creating a more common understanding and way of measuring emergency aid. The other big piece I would say is around childcare solutions. And this is work that we are doing directly with Carrie and Trellis. We have parenting student voice research being led by our faculty in Kentucky. We have a landscape analysis and parenting student toolkit. And we also have coaching for 5 campuses that are really looking at the system redesign of childcare solutions to support their parenting students. A lot of times folks might think, well, I guess, does this mean I have to open a daycare on campus? And we're really looking much more broadly at our ecosystem of support that is in the community that our campuses are in and that our parenting students live in. But there is not just one silver bullet solution to how we can best support our parenting students. So very excited about that parenting student work. As I mentioned before, we do have our connector partnership, which are full-time employees placed on our community college campuses to screen students for public benefits. It is really exciting to see the impact of these connectors over such a short window of time. And I know that this data is slightly several months, but slightly outdated. But in the first 19 months of the partnership, our 16 connectors had made over 65,000 contacts with students on their campuses. And that is actually more than the total enrollment at KCTCS. And so it just shows that they're really out there, and it takes sometimes more than one communication with a student for them to feel comfortable to ask questions or to think, to gather some information and then come back later. Those broad outreach contacts have resulted in 6,500 individual appointments with students where the student can share their unique story. And then that connector can provide them very customized and targeted resources and information, applying for benefits, referrals to community-based organizations. Many times they're filling out multiple benefits, a SNAP application and a Medicaid application, and being referred to a community-based organization who may have some other kind of support. So this has just been a really incredibly successful and high impact partnership for our students. The basic needs data dashboard. This is a great learning process as well. And we are, Kentucky is also a part of the SHIO Basic Needs Data Academy. And so we're trying to do a lot of work in this data space to set some benchmarks in Kentucky, to have common definitions around basic needs issues, to align tracking across our institutions. And there are some pieces of information that we can get directly from our institutions that they already report to CPE. But then there's others that would be just their institution tracks this, like food swipes at the pantry. Like your ID swipes at the pantry, or applications even for emergency aid, which is not yet tracked at the state level. But the dashboard itself has been really good at getting a handle on what information do we already have, which will allow us to see what information do we not have that could be helpful. We're focusing in on benefit accessibility for our students, especially those from low-income backgrounds, such as those receiving Pell Grants. We are looking on enrollment, retention, and completion trends for parenting students, and we're looking at that by region because we know in Kentucky, 60% of our counties are childcare deserts, and we believe that that will have a significant impact on enrollment. We're looking at unmet need and kind of the financial tipping point for students and how their level of unmet need impacts the number of hours that they need to work, loans that they may take out, et cetera. And we're also looking at the economic mobility, not just the value of higher education, which does show strong economic mobility outcomes over time, but also specifically how it helps our individuals that might be receiving Pell Grants or receiving a SNAP benefit, and how their economic mobility 1, 3, and 5 years out of their post-secondary program, how that is impacting them. Just a couple of stats, when we originally did some research, so this is not necessarily aligned with our dashboard, but it was baseline research for us. We found that 80% of our community college graduates who had received SNAP benefits were either re-enrolling and continuing their education, or they were working in Kentucky and earning above 200% of the federal poverty level. So that to us really shows the power of our post-secondary programs, and even especially at our community and technical colleges, to help students and individuals really change their earning potential over time. And here's just a little snapshot from one of our dashboards to show what that looks like over time as well. So a lot of students 1 year out are continuing their education, almost 30%. And then you can see that 5 years out, 2/3 are earning above 200% of their federal poverty level for a single individual. So I'm wrapping up here and just wanted to share that, basic needs work is not done in 3 years after you launch a strategy. But I am very excited about our progress and all that we have learned along the way. And really, I think setting ourselves up for continued work, deepened partnership across the state, and really identifying what might be next for Kentucky. As you all know, with some of the federal changes that have happened with public benefit programs, we have a significant focus on sustaining our connector partnership. We do know that it is in jeopardy, and that it is funded through a Medicaid source, which had a significant budget shortfall this past year in Kentucky. And so we are really trying to make the case of the impact of the access to benefits, and just knowing that it is a temporary support for students who are ultimately working toward their economic mobility. That's all that I had, Carrie, but I am happy to chat more and answer any questions or continue the discussion.
Yeah, let's chat. I've got a question, Zoe. I've got your question in here. We're definitely going to get to that. I have a couple of questions to set up some context, because I think the people on this webinar are probably green with envy hearing about all the amazing data that you've been sharing. And I would love for you to get a little bit of context on your data in Kentucky and KY stats to maybe tamp down their envy a little bit.
You want some more information on our data?
Yeah, can you talk about KY stats and like why you have access to such powerful data?
Yes, thank you. So Kentucky Center for Statistics, KY Stats, was established by our legislature as a centralized longitudinal data center. They are able to connect way more data than I shared in my brief presentation, including, so I've mentioned all of the benefits data. So data from our Cabinet for Health and Family Services, data from our Department of Motor Vehicles, which will include, all of the important information on a driver's license, et cetera. We have data from our Department of Corrections, so you can, really see and track individuals from corrections into employment or into education programs and beyond. It includes employment data in Kentucky, which I always want to clarify that, employment in Kentucky, as well as earnings through the unemployment insurance data field. They have access to tax information and other pieces of information. They get all the financial aid files from our Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority. They, of course, receive all of our post-secondary data. They have all of our K through 12 data from the Kentucky Department of Education. They have everything. And that's awesome. The challenge a little bit is that they are not allowed to share under any circumstances student level data. And so I can ask all the data questions that I want, and they will happily give me the aggregated data. And I can even ask it to be disaggregated in many ways until I hit suppression issues, data suppression. But it is an incredible resource, and our data center, KY Stats, are phenomenal partners. I would love to have the student level information, as I'm sure we all would. But I will say that it already exists, a partnership, a data sharing agreement between our community and technical college system and the Department for Community-Based Services. So they are a subunit within the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. So DCBS will have SNAP data, and our KTAP, which is TANF, and they'll have a lot of other benefit program data through DCBS. So in theory, our KCTCS institution or system could send over their student level data to DCBS and ask for some other student level information back, such as access to benefits by name. Which of course, as you know, the benefit to that would just be now I can do actual targeted outreach to students who may be eligible for benefits but are not yet receiving them. We're very, very thankful for our data system in Kentucky.
That's very helpful, Lily, because anytime I talk about all the amazing things you do there, I have to be like, but they have KY Stats. So there's, and that's a system that was like a decade in the making. So I have other questions for you, but I have a couple of questions in the chat. This one is definitely from Zoe. Said, curious about the connector model. Are they college employees? If not, where are they employed? How are they funded? Thanks for sharing about this work.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, the connectors are not college employees. So the Cabinet for Health and Family Services funds them through Medicaid funds. And so then they have a contract or a subcontract with 5 organizations in Kentucky that handle all of the connector outreach across the state. And so the partner that got the contract to work with our community college system is called the Kentucky Primary Care Association, KPCA. So the 16 connectors are full-time employees of KPCA who are approved to provide all of the training around benefit program eligibility and application assistance and community-based referrals. So they are trained by KPCA in the expert information around benefits. They have access to the DCBS and cabinet data systems for tracking and applications and benefits and those sort of things. So and then they are placed on our community college campuses. We had to do quite a bit of figuring out how that partnership was going to work. There was a preference, of course, that they were employees of the college and that the college would take on some of the all of the training roles that would go into that contract. But the much quicker way to execute was to add on to an existing contract with an organization that already knew how to do all the things and had all of the infrastructure built and the training materials, et cetera. So our connectors, they have an office space, they have a campus email address, they have access to some of the technology platforms, such as their, let's just say Starfish, their early alert system. And they can, and the campus embraces them, introduces them around, tries to really assimilate them or acculturate them as a community college employee. So they are technically an employee of our community partner, KPCA, but they really serve fully our community college students as a KCTCS employee would.
Thanks, Lily. Super helpful. I have another question in here, and I'd like to leave it to you to answer first, and I have some thoughts as well. Somebody asked, what recommendations do you have for leaders within a specific higher education institution to do some of this statewide work?
So our work at the state level, the SHIO level, was really initiated by campus partners. And so it was the campus voice kind of over and over sharing how these are the challenges. As a new initiative, I was on a listening tour. And so I was asking people very directly, what keeps you up at night? If you had a magic wand and could fix an issue, what would it be? What's your top priority? And basic needs seem to be, the nut that couldn't crack. And so from an institutional perspective, I would just say there are a lot of more informal networks in a state. And I know that they exist because I hear about them and I see them, and I used to be a part of some of them. But like our vice presidents for student success will get together, and they'll have an informal meeting because they want to share some of the things and the common challenges that they're facing and get perspective from other campuses and how they're handling these things. So from an institution level, there certainly is value in bringing that up with counterparts at other institutions. One of my other mantras is go where the energy is. And so it is very important to kind of build energy around the work that is a priority. And it is hard to get momentum and buy-in when there is little energy for something. And so that could mean, how do I build energy? Well, you can build energy through data. You can build energy through student stories, through pain points and bringing them to, the attention of your leaders. And then I'm not sure what state this may be, but, you may also have other community-based organizations or other state agencies that have the same priorities and would be really wonderful partners. We found that with both our Cabinet for Health and Family Services as well as our adult ed programming, GED to postsecondary. And so both of those were really wonderful partners. So I would say reach out to your counterparts across your state. And if there is energy there, then really kind of raise it up through reaching out to your SHIO or other kind of coordinating organization that might be able just to be willing to facilitate a conversation to get a sense of where people are and what are the top priorities in this issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Lily. That was really helpful. And it has continued to be such a joy working with your state agency people, and their enthusiasm for wanting to work together and wanting to devise solutions has been fantastic. I will say I have been doing this work with states trying to implement systemic approaches for about 10 years. And so if you're in Kentucky, you should just call Lily because she would be happy to fold you into all of the amazing things you're doing. If you're not in Kentucky, one of the things Lily said is, where is the energy? And I would describe that a little bit differently. I would say tie it to something the state already cares about. Like this very clearly fit under Kentucky's 60 by 30 educational attainment goal. The Success Collaborative set two very crisp objectives for that work, which was improving students' access to state supports and improving people on state supports access to post-secondary education. That really, I think, created very clear through lines to what they were trying to accomplish. And then I would say, understanding, is there already work being done on this in the state, or is this something that you're building from scratch? What data exists to point to the problem? I think I mentioned earlier the student financial wellness surveys provided free of charge to institutions. It has been since 2018. It will continue to be provided free of charge. We're already starting to work on next year's instrument. So if you're interested in building more data, we're happy to help with that. And also, I'm more than happy to chat. A lot of what I do is just these connection points across what is happening in what state, who should you talk to, where else can you learn from? So if you didn't get my email address at the beginning, it was in the slide. I'm happy to share that in the chat. So happy to help figure out what some of those concrete next steps might be for you. Lily, we had talked about a couple of things in the preparation for this conversation that were understanding what were some of we'll do challenges next. I think what we can talk about first is what were the factors that contributed to the success of this work, as you would want to share with this group?
I think having a process was one of the successes, was one of the things that contributed to some success. Because every time we had a network meeting, I pulled out that process wheel and I told them where we were and where we were headed. And it was also a group that had a very specific purpose, and their goal was to get us to the strategy document. And then we would re-invite folks in if they wanted to continue involvement in strategy implementation and community of practice. So I think that having a process or a way of working together that was very clear and shared with all helped us keep the energy, because you can have like a lot of energy at the beginning and then we're like, where are we going? What's next? And you feel like you're not sure, even though somebody has a plan, somebody has an agenda, but to, I guess, be so transparent about it can be very helpful for your stakeholders. Other successes, I would say, would be really great leadership from many of our state's partners. So our lieutenant governor was a part of the Action Network. Our commissioner for the Department for Community-Based Services and several of her leaders that ran specific benefit programs. So there was incredible leadership. Our executive director for adult education, key leaders from the community-based organizations, nonprofit sector, and of course, all of our campuses had representatives as a part of the Action Network. We had a mix of both small group meetings where folks would really get to kind of dig in, and then we had larger Action Network type meetings where it would be more share, reflect, feedback. But I think that was a nice balance, because it is hard to make decisions in a group of 50, but you can definitely get a sense of the overall. You can do some of the work ahead of time and then share it with a large group to make sure that we're still on track and we have the right items here. Those are some of the process and the leadership, are two really significant.
Yeah, and I'm summarizing those as Lily's chatting. I'm going to drop them in the chat. One of the things that I would add to that, Lily, because I experienced this firsthand with you, was what I think you call backbone support. Mm-hmm. And the Success Collaborative's role in being that convening body and carrying the ball forward and making sure, all the trains were leaving, whatever analogy you want to insert here, really having that sort of organizing body really had a huge difference.
Thank you, Carrie. And that is a great role that the SHIO can play, or even a nonprofit organization. The backbone support are the folks that wake up every day thinking about this work. So a lot of our partners, we respect their day jobs, and we are so thankful that they are in the trenches doing this hard work. And so when you want to kind of come out to a 50,000 foot level and create a statewide approach or strategy, you do need somebody that can dedicate their real time, attention, energy, because it's not just, there are logistics and planning meetings and whatever, but the other pieces of the backbone support is to go get the data that people are asking about, to have that follow-up meeting with a partner who couldn't make it, but is a really critical voice and stakeholder. And just to when things don't go as planned, to be able to have the bandwidth, to be adaptable, but to keep everybody moving forward, even if you're zigzagging just a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks, Lily. Super helpful. And you had mentioned one thing when you and I were chatting about both the time commitment and the prioritization and building trusting relationships. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
The overall time commitment for the strategy development?
No, for the building trusting relationship.
Oh, yes.
Building that piece of it for the relationship building.
It is a really important thing to prioritize. You might just assume that, we're all here for the same reason, so we're going to have, trust is an automatic. And maybe a surface level amount of trust is an automatic. But to really build trusting relationships, we worked that into the agenda. To get to know folks, to ask them to share about their work, to ask them to share what was important to them about being engaged in this initiative, why basic needs for postsecondary students or access to postsecondary education for individuals receiving benefits was a high priority for them, what they personally hope to get out of their participation, what is the value add for your work, how does working with us help make your job easier. And I think that all of those very clear questions helped people just get to know folks at a slightly deeper level and really feel a sense of we are all in this together. I will say that there are sometimes complicated politics that are in the room that you may not even know about, or it's between two partners and it goes way back. And do they even know what the source of the issue is? And we had that. But I think, I just had to keep asking very clearly, but we're all trying to do this thing together, right? Like I would have one partner maybe say that they weren't sure if this other partner would be a great partner for them. And, we have to ask that question and make sure that our partners are, I think, open and transparent about what it is that they get out of it, because whatever the other issue may be, it didn't come into the work that we were doing here. It was a separate issue. But just to be aware of that and to be a good listener to your partners when they express concerns about trust or other partners that are also working on this, so that you can hopefully help clarify and facilitate some bridge building.
Yeah. I dropped those into the chat, and not necessarily in that order, so I included them. But I was going to ask about challenges, and I know because I was there with you that there were plenty that we overcame. But I actually think I'd be interested to hear, what's your dream for the next phase of this work? Not the stuff you've already talked about, but like, not that you don't have enough on your plate. Do you have a next big, like, I want to like tackle this next once we get done with, all the parenting students work, and, we've got that nailed down, and the data and all of the trusting sources?
Oh my gosh, Carrie. Oh my gosh, that's such a huge question. Well, I guess there are so many dreams. There are so many opportunities, and, removing basic needs barriers for students is not something that like one dream can really, I don't think one dream could do it. But, we have free technical programs in Kentucky. So our tuition is already free for 100 and some programs at our community college system. And one of a very significant barrier to student enrollment and completion is money. And so I don't think that we're doing a great job of really clearly communicating that you're in, it's free, and here's the path to getting that, career or job that has these outcomes, these economic mobility outcomes for our students and individuals. So, and we also have incredible workforce demand in very aligned areas of this work. So if we could just start telling our student or our prospective student population that it's free, and you're in, and here's what you can do when you finish. I think that we would remove a lot of the personal barriers, I'm not worthy, it's been so long, I can't afford it. What do I want to do? Like really just helping folks, like we can do this together, and here are some of the steps. So that already exists, but then the spreading of that to a much broader audience, programs, pathways, that would be the dream, that everybody can go to college for free, at least the first 2 years for free in Kentucky.
I thought that was a great answer, Lily. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today. As Andrea mentioned, we'll be sending out the webinar recording and probably the slides after we, download them into PDF format. You've got mine and Lily's contact information. Andrea shared our upcoming events, so feel free to check those out. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you, Lily, for being such a phenomenal partner.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. I'll see you later.
Pleasure. Have a great day. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.